Corporations are not your friends. This has always been the case. However, every now and then a big old corporation will come along and do something, often through an advertising campaign, to make itself more likable, and a bunch of people will fall for it. Back in the day, many corporations that had products that were aimed at kids would put out games, and there are loads of examples of this from back in the day. For instance, there are games from 7-Up, Chex, and Pepsi, but the fad seemingly died down. Probably because games are more expensive to make now. However, today I'm going to talk about I Love You, Colonel Sanders, a finger-licking good dating simulator. This game is both a relic and a bizarre forward-thinking step for KFC. The reason is that while it was released in 2019 and has the kind of contemporary meme-oriented view of marketing that has become quite successful for the companies that have adopted it, it also has sensibilities from back in the day. Companies just don't put out licensed games like they used to, and to be honest, even though it is very obviously a piece of corporate propaganda, it has a certain charm to it. KFC is not an ethical company, which I'm sure is a shocker. The company is a fast food chain, and that means it produces intentionally unhealthy food on a mass scale. It is also a company that typically offers minimum wage to those who work in its kitchens, and there is the very publicized reality of its immensely unethical treatment of the chickens that are killed and turned into the food it sells. We all know this, but companies don't like to be seen as unethical. They want you to think that they are doing good, and that is also why they lean on mascots like Colonel Sanders. The figure of Colonel Sanders is a very interesting one because unlike things like Ronald McDonald and the King guy from Burger King, Sanders was very much a real person. He has become mythologized over the decades into a symbol, and I Love You, Colonel Sanders serves a role meant to further mythologize him for the contemporary era. The game makes him a sexy boy to date. The game itself is a bizarre one in terms of licensed games, and that's because it is a parody dating simulator that draws inspiration from anime sensibilities. Your character is with Colonel Sanders in a cooking school that's like something out of that Food Wars show. Although I must say, I've only seen like 2 episodes, but I know it takes place in a cooking school. And there's everything you'd expect from an anime-type narrative. You have a rival, the love interest, various competitions that exist for seemingly no reason, some monsters show up at some point. Basically, it's a very typical anime dating simulator, but everything is just KFC-oriented. The whole thing is obviously a joke, and it progresses like the most typical anime love story would. There is nothing special about the actual narrative itself, but rather the purpose behind all of this. You see, the first thing you might think when you think of I Love You, Colonel Sanders is that it's weird. It's a bizarre choice for a multi-billion-dollar company to make. It's basically all a meme. And then, if you get around to actually playing it, you'll quickly discover that it's also just not really unique in what it does, other than the fact that this cooking school keeps making KFC products. But that's pretty much the point. The real narrative on display here has to do with marketing. How do you rehabilitate the image of a company? You change it for the modern age. You do what has been a mainstay in advertising for quite some time now and make it silly and zany. But the problem is that everyone has done that. You will find ads for various products now that they're just dumb. The adverts are meant to be weird and hardly have anything to do with the actual product. But just doing that is unoriginal at this point. You need something that actually stands out. Everyone makes weird, unrelated television ads these days, but no one makes games, do they? So you pay a company to make a game. And that is what they did. They needed to produce corporate propaganda that would be enjoyable to consume and inoffensive to the people who are usually against advertising. And you also need to put it where not even an ad blocker can hide it. And then, to put the cherry on top, you make it free. This means that as a novelty product, it can be easily picked up and played without a potential consumer needing to pay for anything. Propaganda can far more easily propagate when you do not need people to pay for it. And that is what I Love You, Colonel Sanders is. It is a cynical game meant to serve as corporate propaganda. That is all it is. It may be entertaining in its own right, and I would be lying if I said I didn't play it when it came out to have a few chuckles at what it was doing. But you always need to remember what this kind of product is trying to do. This is a product designed solely to get you to want to go out and buy some KFC. As I have said, the actual narrative in the game is inconsequential. It could have been something else that was silly. All it needed to be was something bizarre that people would be fascinated enough by to want to have a look. The more eyes on the advertising, the better the marketing campaign will be. However, the reality of a company is not the same as the narrative that it wants to spin, and you need to beware of the ways in which companies will use something fundamentally likable, like a seemingly silly piece of media, to get you to think better of them. You cannot simply separate the product from the tangible reality that gave birth to it. You can't purely see I Love You, Colonel Sanders as a piece of art detached from KFC. It is KFC. And even if you never buy a thing from the company, you have fallen for some of their corporate spin when you positively engage with something like this.